Who is Sound and Sea, and their record Sound and Sea? Should you give it a listen? Well, I hope this helps. Sound and Sea is a group of musicians from Olalla, Washington, I believe, the American Northwest. You know what? I'll let them describe themselves. Sound and Sea is a community of worshipers from the Burnport Orchard team with the Burn 24/7 ministry committed to celebrating God within us. There you have it. Don't ask me what those ministries are. I'm not familiar with it. But I do know they had an Indiegogo campaign where they were raising money to record this album. And I think then to go on a release tour, which I'm not sure if that ever happened because they did not make their full goal. They were setting out to make, I think, $12,000, and they only made half of that. But I guess it was enough to make this record, so we benefit from that. On this record, it's basically this combination of songs that come from the different people within this group called Sound and Sea. The tracks are extremely varied because you've got different artists approaching the record, bringing their own track, bringing their own song that they wrote. But I don't know if they necessarily collaborated with each other to bring tracks that were would have interplay with each other, so therefore you'd have a whole album that had a cohesive meaning or a message or a flow or a theme. Honestly, all the tracks, I guess emotionally, flow pretty well, but stylistically it's extremely varied across the album. You take that first track, Faithful, and that last track, The Melody, they're worlds apart. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, if you approach this album knowing that it's a collection of songs written by these group of friends, these group of believers in a ministry, then, I think it's pretty good for what it is. And I think I give it a pass for being so varied and incohesive. Now, when you think about the album as a whole and the lyrics, I felt that creatively they weren't bad, but theologically they were just, frankly, immature and forgettable. For one, I don't think God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, Christian, the cross, any terms that would point you explicitly towards what they're singing about are even mentioned until the very last song, the very last track, The Melody. And in that song, there's lines that say, "What's with all this hope? Why are we so glad?" Well, I would think people would be asking that by the time they get to the end of this album. You haven't mentioned any real reasons for your joy and your gladness. Not that you have to give a dissertation on every reason for why you feel a certain way. But honestly, as a ministry's release, it makes very little sense to me why a ministry would release an album whose gospel message is so cloudy and confusing. The first song, Faithful, has a line in there, "Even when I tried to rebuke your name, you were by my side." That's such a good lyric. Honestly, that's probably the strongest gospel lyric in this entire album. With this record, the second listen through honestly took the good songs and made them feel better, and the bad songs and made them feel worse. It just widened that divide where I thought, man, some of these songs, like You Grew My Heart is my favorite track on this album. The lyrics are so clever and so interesting, and they put you in this place that I don't think most people have thought of before. They're from the perspective of a little girl singing to her mother that you grew my heart in yours. That line that it has in the chorus, "I feel the pulse of your heart," or the other line that it repeats, "Every heartbeat that I have is yours." And the musicality in You Grew My Heart, the instrumentation and the balance was excellent. You have this pop and an electronic sensibility to it, but it's definitely calm. It's almost like chill pop. The very first song, Faithful, has this really earnest sound, this really stripped back acoustic tone, That song too really used silence or just open space really, really well. That song would, there'd be moments where they'd hold out a note and it would just let it sit in near silence. There's some sort of nature sounds going on in the background. It would let it sit in near silence for 2-3 seconds. The fourth track, I Am Here, that song reminds me a lot of Ben Howard as far as vocals go. You got these vocal drop-offs in the melody where they'll sing a line and the last two words will just kind of drop off melodically. This self-harmony, even the tone of the voice reminds me a lot of Ben Howard. The crescendo in this song was very reminiscent of tracks from Bon Iver's last album. You have this sound of multiple drum sets, or this crescendo that's made honestly through layering. It's not really through an increase in volume. It's just that more drums are coming in and more guitars are coming in and the voice is echoing around on itself. And her voice is beautiful, and it's simple yet it's rich. You don't find anything lacking in it, but you also don't find it overpowering like some forced operatic voice or something. It's very simple, and it fits exactly where it needs to in this track. The song I Am Your Story, that is about as quirky as Juno. Now, I love that. I thought it was great. I thought it was a really unique track. It sounded like it was recorded with like one room mic or something, or maybe a couple room mics, and everyone just kind of stood around it, had their instruments with them, and made the song happen. This seventh track, Let the Light In, this track lost its luster after a few times. It just wasn't a track that had anything deeper than what you might find in a first or second listen through. And the song, the melody, the final track, the vocals, when they first came in, reminded me of like Peter, Bjorn, and John or something like that. One of these bands with really echoey vocals that aren't super melodic. They're kind of monotone at times. Isn't it interesting that the song, the melody, is the least melodic song on this entire record? And if you're into that sort of house beat groove, the 16th note hi-hats, repetitive beat, you'd probably like this track a lot. Overall, this album exceeds my expectations musically. I wasn't expecting this to be as creative or expansive on certain tracks as it was. Lyrically, this album was pretty dull, was pretty unhelpful. What this album suffers from is something that many Christian albums suffer from, which is that their lyrics are so stylized to the Christian music or media scene that they really don't match real life. The lyrics, in terms of the phrasing and the verbiage, they're just things that you've heard before, and they're honestly things that are really, really vague and frankly confusing to someone who doesn't have a deeper understanding of what went behind these tracks. Overall, I would have to put this album a little bit ahead of good, right between good and great. It was an enjoyable listen. It's something I'll definitely be coming back to. But I wish there was more. I wish there was more that I could grab onto, and I wish that some of these tracks had lyrics that choked me up every time. Anyway, I hope this helped. See ya.